Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 26.
26.
Good to be back. And in the same room as each other.
I know, yeah, back to it.
In stroking distance.
Oh. I'm really pleased about that, actually.
Yes, likewise. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, the first of our director deep dive episodes. Our original plan was myself and Ben have chosen 4 directors each.
Yeah.
And then we were going to let you, the adoring listener, pick the other 4, maybe.
Yeah.
And then we'd do like a wheel thing, and then that director would come up. And the idea was we do these episodes like once every few weeks. Should there be like a dry run in the cinema, or we have like a certain hankering to talk about a certain filmmaker.
Yeah.
But the news this week sort of decided it for us.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was quite sad news.
Yeah.
I was about to say bittersweet. It's not sweet at all. It's just, it's always nasty when a film director who has made a series of films that are loved by both of us passes away. It's always slightly shocking.
Yeah.
And so it was difficult not to think about him this week. So good to talk about his movies.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, he was 87, so he had a long life. I
guess.
But no, you're right. I think filmmakers such as this has, had such an impact on us, and I'm sure many people. You can't help but revisit those films and then want to talk about those films.
Yeah.
I guess without sounding sort of too morbid, that's one of the few positives about dying, is that maybe more people will sort of.
I hope so, because it certainly sort of provoked me into rewatching one of his classics.
The filmmaker in question, of course, is William Friedkin.
Yes.
Someone that I was sort of reflecting on this a little bit. I think in the context of, when he started making, when he started working, should I say, he was part of that sort of new Hollywood era.
Yeah.
Sort of late 60s, early 70s, your sort of Martin Scorsese's, your Francis Ford Coppola's, etc. And when you think about him in that context, he sort of gets brushed under the rug a little bit.
Yeah, completely. Considering he's made some absolute classics.
Yeah.
He's probably made the same amount of absolute classics that Coppola has, arguably. Would you say? And yet Coppola is a lot more kind of still, even after all these years, he's still kind of put on this pedestal with like Scorsese, Spielberg, Lucas. Maybe not Lucas. Sorry, George. But it's odd that, he's often overlooked.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's because of controversy surrounding The Exorcist, but then, like Apocalypse Now wasn't, without its controversy as well, so I don't know.
Maybe it's something to do with consistency. Like we were sort of saying before, we were trying to unpick why that was, but I mean, if you think about Scorsese, particularly, you had like a slew of hits, and I think after Friedkin's made The Exorcist, that was after French Connection, wasn't it? The Exorcist?
Yeah, 73, I think.
Should know that, really. But it's he had a few duds, and and even like Sorcerer, which is now in the modern lens considered a great film, tanked for obvious reasons, which we'll get into.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then again, he had a few misses, and then didn't really find his feet again till To Live and Die in LA. And then, of course, as his career went on, he had a few gems. But, there's some sort of diamonds in the rough in his career.
Yeah.
And I think because of that lack of consistency, maybe that is why he isn't sort of put in the same pantheon as people like Scorsese. Or perhaps isn't as sort of like well-known would probably be the better way. Because I think for, film fans, he definitely is well-known. Yeah. But even for me, I sort of, when I think about that era, his name doesn't really come up for me. And I think that's, a bit of a problem, considering that he made, one of the sort of defining films in the horror genre and one of the defining films in the cop or buddy cop or police procedural dramas.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting that in that regard. Oh,
completely. Yeah, I think we'll talk about this more in the meat of the discussion. I've got one or two ideas about why that might be, but
yeah. Shall we do
stuff. Let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void. William Friedkin, then. As you sort of alluded to, or sort of directly addressed in the opening, a key figure in sort of the new age of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Even if he's not quite as popular as the others, he certainly, it should be and absolutely is, given the success of French Connection and The Exorcist, which helped usher in this sort of, new period of cinema. We've talked about this quite a lot, so I'm not going to talk about that bit too much. But I think what's interesting about him in particular is that like Robert Altman, who's another filmmaker of that ilk, he cut his teeth working in sort of television. So Friedkin sort of cut his teeth in television, working his way up through the television industry, and then eventually making documentaries.
Okay.
And I think that's a really critical thing to pick out about him in terms of his development as a creative.
Yeah.
In the sense that that sort of documentary style and aesthetic is prevalent in all of his films.
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah.
And it's really sort of essential to the success of his best films, I think. That sort of cinema verite, documentary aesthetic, that uncomfortable closeness to the subject matter.
Yeah, and also it's like the camera doesn't really know where to look.
Yeah,
it's sort of it's following the action but slightly late, which can prove, and definitely in the case of the French Connection, is like ridiculously effective. It makes that chase sequence just like nail bitingly good.
So good. And again, I guess I sort of want to hammer the point home. I think a lot of people said that he peaked too early with those two films.
Okay.
And I guess in his sort of the kind of impact they had on their respective genres, and the awards that he garnered, I guess in a way there might be something to that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really unfair to say that by and large when you consider the other great films in his work, which we're going to unpack later on. We mentioned To Live and Die in LA, which I just love. You've got other films.
Killer Joe is
Killer Joe,
relatively recent one.
Yeah,
got another one coming out soon.
Has he?
Yeah, he's completed a film called The Kane Mutiny Court Martial.
Oh, okay.
It's coming out it's completed apparently. It's his last film. So,
okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have waited until that film came out and got maybe we'll do that film in another episode or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But I do think he held his own.
Absolutely.
Not inconsistently, but Coppola did the same. He's made it. Have you seen his filmography? Coppola's filmography? Yeah. Jesus Christ!
There's some belters in there, but a lot of
a lot of experimental kind of throwaway stuff in there as well.
I just think most filmmakers have that, and I think it's sort of a bit unfair. I think they do it because, again, like we said before, the era and the filmmakers were just like repeatedly knocking films out of the park, and sort of sculpting this new identity, which is representative of the shift in American culture.
Yeah,
and obviously Friedkin achieves that in two films, and then his other efforts after that either don't garner the sort of the critical acclaim or the audience appreciation for whatever reason. And I think when put up against those other filmmakers and the era, I think that's why a lot of people feel that way about him.
Yeah.
But again, as we've said, great films. Another film called Bug as well, which I watched today.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I've not seen it, but
looking forward to talking about that because great.
I'm looking forward to hearing about it actually, because I very nearly watched it some time ago and I never did. Maybe now's the time.
Yeah, a real hidden gem actually.
Okay.
I know that term gets thrown around quite a lot for films that are really quite well known, but knew nothing about it. Jan recommended it to me actually.
Oh, okay, nice.
Ages ago, and I bought it on his recommendation. Forgot I had it, and then when we decided to do this episode, I was like, perfect. Here we go.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
So I guess what we should do now then really is talk about his films.
Yeah.
And we should sort of talk about them chronologically, I guess.
Let's do it,
So, go on, Ben.
Right, so, French Connection. Rewatched it last night.
Lucky bugger.
It's so good. It's just so like... It was one of the first, the whole good cop, bad cop thing, which became a bit of a trope. And it's like taking the piss out of in like the other guys. I get the feeling that's probably sort of where it not necessarily started, but sort of flourished a little bit. You've got Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman being the bad cop, and Roy Scheider being the guy who sort of pulls him back and keeps him in check and quips at him. He's just like he's sort of got like a horrendous hangover, and he's like, Roy Scheider's always there to be like, what are you like, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Really hard boiled, very sort of straight talking two guys, and they're investigating apparently quite a well-known sort of drug syndicate, which so heroin was produced in Turkey, came over to France, and then hopped its way over to the United States, and that's why they call it the French Connection, is because of that the route that the drugs sort of took. And I think what the strengths in The French Connection, really where they lie is when they're following. They're just constantly following them, like physically as well. Like there's no. I mean, obviously, this is sort of pre-internet, so all their like all their sort of detective work is just them following them. And there's some really wicked sequences where Gene Hackman's character, what's his name, Popeye? Popeye Doyle is just like put in relentless pursuit of these sort of drug kingpins. And one really great thing I love about it is occasionally the pursuits go nowhere. There's like a large, especially in the first half, is like there's a lot of them getting stuff wrong, and that just whilst that kind of could appear boring, what it actually does is it's boiling the tension up, and the tension is kind of, and the suspense is there, but the suspense isn't generated from things you can't see. It's just, it's right there in front of you, and you're like, oh yeah, and you never know when they're going to be successful. So it's that kind of trial and error thing they put into that he's sort of playing with, which I think makes it so delightful. And obviously the aforementioned chase, the classic car chase of him chasing a train, just like commandeers a car from a guy and then bombs it down this seemingly endless road in pursuit of a train, and it's just fantastic, like amazingly shot, pitch perfect scenario. And weird, I forgot it ends on a bit of a downer. Do you remember?
Yeah.
They just they get reassigned, and it's like in text. It sort of reminded me of the ending to Blowout, where it's like he's lost. He's just lost. They've caught them, but they weren't successful, and that I always thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
There we go. Love that film. A real pleasure to rewatch it. And what you were saying about his sort of cinema verite style, he apparently he made some documentaries. I think he made a couple of films by that point, like lesser known films. And he watched Z, I think, the film at Z, which has kind of employed that similar sort of documentary aesthetic. And that's when he realised, I can use that. I can use those skills that I developed as a documentary filmmaker in a movie, and I can use it for the narrative. Like, and that's when because I mean, it's quite commonplace now. You've got like Children of Men, you've got all sorts of films employ that style, but it was probably quite new at that point. And that's when he realised, like, I can make a film just on the fly. A lot of it, no permission was granted to film places, just did it. Like there was a kind of, they had a bit of a tenuous relationship with the police, although largely positive, obviously, because it's based on real people. Yes, they just didn't have the money to get permits, so proper sort of 28 Days Later style. They're like, right, let's just go out and film this like from the hip. Really great. And anyone who hasn't seen it, implore you to watch it. First half is a bit slow, I think, but it works in its favour in the end, because the second half is just so like palpable. And you wouldn't get that tension if you hadn't seen the first act and a half that preceded it, if that makes sense. Love it.
Great film. I just think it's arguably one of the greatest sort of New York crime films. Again, we sort of talk about that new age Hollywood thing, but I think a lot of the great filmmakers have like an urban movie. Scorsese with Taxi Driver, and it's like these films that sort of treat these cities, these sort of typically sort of celebrations of like American sort of cultural or sort of economic dominance, but now they're sort of viewed as like these sort of dark, sprawling urban labyrinths where like danger waits in every corner, and they're gritty and dirty and
imperfect.
And even though this city is so vast and populated by so many people, there are so many secrets that are hidden in the alleyways or the dilapidated buildings. And I just think it works so well in conjunction with, as you say, Friedkin's documentary style aesthetic in the sort of, in covering this sort of like cat and mouse chase across the city and all the sort of dead ends. And you really get the sense of what like ground level police work is like in that particular time.
Yes.
And it's about chasing leads. It's about, coming down hard on criminals. And again, I'm not saying that from, like, I enjoyed the that element, but it encapsulates that era, and it's all about the sort of how people handle authority, particularly in position, and the power that comes with being a police officer, and how people like Popeye, who is by his very nature a sort of a bigot, racist, utilizes that power in his ceaseless quest. He's like a sort of rabid dog, isn't he? He just won't stop until he gets what he wants.
He's the ultimate maverick, isn't he?
Yeah. And that's so sort of like central to police procedurals, or indeed buddy cop movies. There's always one that tends to be a little bit more a bit more
fast and loose.
Yeah. But I think it just sort of works completely in this context and sort of captures there's like a grain that's shared thematically and visually, and I think that's so sort of intrinsically important to this era of cinema in terms of these urban crime films.
Yeah,
and there's something. Obviously, there's a lot of finesse to the movie, as you say. You talk about that amazing chase sequence, but there's a lack of finesse in the cinematography, which really works in that, and it gives the film a sort of a sense of realism.
Yeah,
and you talk about this idea that they didn't shoot with permits, and that the obvious, that Gene Hackman sort of like cutting through huge crowds of people, and it gives the film like a real sort of sense of life, like of everyday life.
Oh, completely.
Which both contrasts and complements the sort of criminal element of the film that they're sort of really desperately trying to hunt down.
Yeah, there's also a lot of sort of homage to noir as well. Like the amount of shots of Gene Hackman walking along a road in New York City, and it's so obviously they've just got a car and a camera. It's so obvious that that's just what they've done, but I love it. Like it's sort of shaky, imperfect chase, and you can tell he's not even running that fast because he kind of had, like, I'm guessing with the New York traffic, they can only go so fast, so he's kind of like semi-running. It's really funny, and it adds to the charm of the film, and also like paints such a wicked picture of New York City, which sadly not a lot of films get made in New York City anymore because of how expensive it is. But like, as a snapshot of New York in 1970, 71, it's like fucking so interesting. It's like a photograph of the whole city in a film. And also a little bit of you can see one of the World Trade Centers being built in one of the shots.
Really?
Yeah. Just as an aside.
I like the idea you talk about the noirish elements of the film, because in a way, because I sort of was picking up on that as well, the idea that there's like a leanness to the narrative. There's no meat on it.
Yeah,
but that sort of services this idea that the sort of drug operation that they're fighting against is almost like unknowable. Its complexity is so deep, and its roots are so entrenched in so many people's lives from the top to the bottom, that it gives it a sort of omnipresence, which is almost sort of talks to the futility of what they're trying to do, which is fight this this sort of morally bankrupt drug syndicate. And they're never really going to win. And I think it speaks to that, because I feel like the best noirs have that sort of sense of futility.
To them.
And I really like the way that's sort of recontextualized and brought into the sort of grit of the early 1970s cinema. And it just shows how much, even though it is like quite a rebellious movie, and indeed a lot of the films from that era it was like an overt rejection of a lot of the sort of things that were put in place by a much more conservative film industry of the time. Not to say there weren't great subversive films made then, but they just to be clever about how they did it. But the filmmakers are still influenced by that, and they know their influences, and they're students of the craft, and they implement that into their films, which I really like.
Yeah, man, I do agree with you. There's some visual homages to noir, right down to the steam vents, right? New York City steam vents, which is like a staple of the noir. Like, you've got to have a steam grate with steam coming out of it, and in a back alley in New York City, and on like a stakeout or something. Spielberg was influenced by a lot of people were influenced by French Connection, but one thing I remember yesterday I was watching it, I was like, this reminds me of Munich quite a lot.
Really? Okay.
I was like, why is this a lot like Munich? And then I was looking it up yesterday, and I was like, shit, Spielberg was influenced by French Connection when he was making Munich. I was like, okay.
What, in terms of the way he sort of captures the tension between the sort of opposing
it reminded me of
I can't remember Munich that well, but
there's a lot of scenes in Munich which involve the precursor sort of moment in time before something awful. There's like three or four scenes, and they're like 6-7 minutes long. These tiny and it's just like I was saying earlier, it's a way of generating tension. And you're like, I genuinely don't know when this is going to go down. And you can. It is so similar. I mean, Munich is shot a lot more gracefully, and that's not me sort of shitting on the French Connection. It works for that film. But there are just moments where the characters are just standing around, looking at each other, talking about something else for a bit to pass the time, whilst they're kind of investigating and just like watching someone from afar, and nothing's really happening. And that both those films have that trope, which like just works so well.
Gives these films a sense of distance that works in the attempt to try and find realism. It makes it feel more real. I mean, the film, cast in various sort of small supporting roles, a lot of actual police officers.
Oh right, okay.
Actual police officers who,
so
obviously they can't necessarily act in the way that Gene Hackman can act, but they're so comfortable in their roles because they're basically just playing what they do every day.
Yeah,
it gives a sort of earthiness, a sort of oily-handed. You know what I mean? There's something so rich about that, and even the scene where Popeye goes into that bar and gets all of the sort of archetypal sort of ruffians to sort of put their hands on the bar or go against the wall. They're all played by police officers.
Right. Okay.
I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting thing. And I was watching an interview with Gene Hackman himself, and he said, one of the great things about the French Connection is that you wouldn't have known that none of those weren't necessarily trained actors.
No,
and
I
he said
wouldn't
that from his experience that often isn't the case.
Oh, right, okay,
and I just think it serves so much. It's all Friedkin is so aware that if he's going to employ this documentary style aesthetic, he has to be framing things that are real.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's only so much you can get away with when you're making a crime film. Obviously, you have to have some artifice. But that there is a lot of realism there, which I really like, and I think is essential to the impact of the film. And again, that sort of sense of futility.
Yeah.
Also, just as an aside, we're talking about the chase sequence from the interview I watched today with Gene Hackman. He talked about that.
Yeah.
And he said that they blocked off 5 blocks.
Yeah, okay.
And did the scene over and over again. And Joe, that bit where he crashes?
Yeah.
That was actually a New York resident's car that he crashed into.
Really?
Yeah. Because they closed the streets.
Yeah.
But obviously they didn't factor in that there were cars parked and the people living in the houses near those cars would have to go to work and all that kind of stuff.
Oh man, okay, yeah.
And he's like screaming it down this stretch.
Yeah. Did a lot of his own driving apparently.
Yeah. Amazing. 75 miles an hour. And he just hammers into this car that just pulls out in the last minute.
Oh man, that's crazy.
And that's in the film. That made it into the cut of the movie. And I just think, again, that's pretty irresponsible from the sort of producing standpoint.
But like the fact they could use it though, it just speaks to just such a genius idea using that cinema verite. He's so good. I mean,
not to sort of romanticize it too much, because I'm sure for the bloke who got his car crashed into, he was furious.
Yeah.
But the idea that that was just, like you say, that was put in the film. It just feels, again, it's easy to romanticize this period of cinema because obviously there is a lot of things that maybe get lost in the abject romanticism. Yeah, but it does feel like it's just people just moving into uncharted territory, and I think Friedkin's very much at the forefront of that. Yeah, no, I agreed. Yeah, Hackman also said he's never been pushed so much by a director. Wow. Okay. Well, The Exorcist has some similar. There's some similar issues there with Linda Blair, wasn't there? Yeah. So we're going to get to talk about that. I think about his incendiary directing style and his difficulty of his character. Which I think a lot of people, and you see it in his interviews as well. He's not afraid to give people both barrels if he thinks they're talking shit. Yeah. I don't know. There's no whereas some people might think, oh, I'll let that slide because I don't, there's no point getting annoyed about it. He definitely doesn't do that. And I think that shows in his directing because Hackman wanted to leave the film. He didn't think he was suitable for it. Oh, right, okay. Given the use
I know he wasn't his first choice either. It wasn't his first choice.
And he went up to Friedkin and said, look, I don't know if I want to stick this out because he had to be really rough and brutish, and obviously there's that scene which I wanted to touch on a little bit. It's going off piece a little bit, but upon doing research about the movie, I was watching a few sort of clips, and it came up that the use of racist language was cut from the film for its run on Disney Plus.
Yeah, because obviously they got 20th Century. Was it Fox's?
Yeah, I think
it's Fox,
so.
isn't it? So they've got all of their properties, and now Splash got censored in a similar fashion, but for nudity, not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I find that really interesting, and it brings up that question about censorship. And I know this is a podcast about Friedkin, but I just couldn't resist but get your take on that, because I think it's a really, obviously it's becoming more and more of a hot debate in terms of how we view past work.
Yes.
And what the sort of right strategy is in terms of how we sort of view it in the modern lens, and how that sort of changes the way in which the film should be watched, and how aspects of the film should be watched. I wonder what your thought process was on that. So
weirdly, although I watched it on Disney Plus last night, that line in particular made it in, and it was, I think it's a UK-US thing. I think it might not have been updated yet, or maybe they think UK audience can stomach it. I don't know. But anyway, it is like quite confrontational when that word, and I'm sure everyone knows what word I'm referring to, is spoken. It is like, oh God, it threw me off a bit, but it is, it's really easy for me to just say, all right, well, this is an artifact. This is from 1971. The character isn't meant to be a golden boy anyway. No. I mean, I know, like, it's, use of racist language is really abrasive, and like the attitude towards the use of that word in particular has changed for the better in recent years, but at the same time, it is like an artifact that you have to take a step back from it. And I do. I think it's interesting that I'm sort of undecided, because at the same time, it is, like I said, it was a tough thing to stomach, because you don't hear it a lot in films. Well, you seldom hear it in films these days, in that context anyway. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
I think that, like, I don't blame people for finding that scene or the use of any kind of language like that in film difficult. And I'm not saying that necessarily that our opinions are the definitive opinions. I'm sure there are people who have the opposite opinion to us, which is absolutely valid. Yeah. But I feel that it's contextual in the era of the movie. Yes. And I think if we talk about films as you said, as artifacts, I think it's doubly important that we don't censor those things in those films.
Completely, yeah.
If you think about the argument which is often levelled at, this is going a bit off, but at sort of school curriculums and the way that they don't teach the darkest parts of certainly British history.
Yes, yeah.
I think we have to take that argument into how we look at sort of, culture of the past, in the sense that, this film is an extension of the time to which it is made. Yeah. And, by censoring that, we are sort of not properly interrogating the film on its historical context. Yeah. We're making it more palatable for a new audience, which again, I'm not saying necessarily is a wholly bad thing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you're watching that film to get a sort of a snapshot, an idea of the era and the attitudes that drove it. And Friedkin isn't putting that in the movie because he shares that belief system. Yeah. I mean, I don't know him, obviously.
No, yeah.
I didn't know him. But, I think for these sort of new era, new wave filmmakers, it'd be a bit reductive of them to use that in a way that was sort of celebratory or anything like that. Yeah. And I just think it's, I think it's really important that we continue to view films in the manner to which they were made, because then they can inform us about the historical context around those films. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that by saying that I enjoy that that's in there.
No, yeah.
But the whole point is, as you say, is that Popeye is a sort of, he's not a nice man. Yeah. He's not, he is again, like,
he's deeply flawed.
A flawed, bigoted, violent individual. Yeah. In classic sort of buddy cop style, is only happy when he's on the job, only happy when he's chasing things. Yeah. And that speaks to the nature of his character. The film isn't elevating police work. He doesn't make police work look great.
No, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
completely.
I don't know. I mean, I can see the opposition argument, but I think it's something that I think has to be kept in. Yeah. For the historical context.
I think if it's if it's a content issue, it's a disclaimer in that case. They should just put a disclaimer on the front. I'd be totally fine with that. If anything, it will prepare me a little bit more for it. Yeah.
Funnily enough, I was at a friend's quite a long time ago, and they put Lady and the Tramp on in the background.
Yes, okay.
And obviously with the Siamese cats,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. They had like a disclaimer at the start saying there are certain parts of this film which may be offensive to certain audiences.
They reflect the attitudes of the time.
Yeah. And I think that's, if you're going to go about it anyway, to me that seems like the best way.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is educational value in keeping those things in.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that again that my opinion is the opinion to have on it.
Yeah.
And it probably would be easy for me to say that, given that I've not had to endure anything like that. But I just feel that keeping it in is to the betterment of understanding the era to which these films are made. But I don't know. A little aside anyway.
There we go.
Shall we move on to The Exorcist?
I think we should, yes.
Yeah, I mean, The Exorcist, to me, like, it's always been a genre icon. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as you know, for me is like the granddaddy of all horror films.
Oh, yeah.
Upon revisiting The Exorcist, not the whole film, but little snippets, because I've seen it a couple of times before, but it's been a long time since I have, it made me realise how fucking good it is.
Yeah.
And how much of a genre icon it deservedly is. And for me, I still think I just about prefer Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but like, I just love it. I just forgot how brilliant it is, and how much it sort of influenced the genre, arguably more than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In the sense, if you look at, cinema's just obsessed with possession films.
Yes,
films typically possess children.
Yeah,
and the impact that has on the family dynamic. And you think, God, that is being done to death and has been for like the last decade. And that's all because of The Exorcist.
Oh yeah 100%. Yeah.
What I imagine you're sort of feeling sort of similar, right?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think it's great. I've seen it a couple of times now. I'm so annoyed. Someone from school, I can't remember who it is, but they told me it was shit, and I took it to heart for some stupid reason. Even though like it was widely regarded even back then, like even though I was only like 13, it was widely regarded as a classic, and I knew that, but I didn't watch it till like 5 years ago. And it's so good. I think the one thing that takes me out of it, and again, like, this isn't analytical of me, it's just the name of the demon, and I think I might have mentioned this before.
Oh yeah,
it's shit. It's called Pazuzu.
Oh yeah,
sounds
Pazuzu.
Like an Australian bird or something. Like, I never liked the name of the demon, and it really threw me.
I quite like it. Yeah, I can sort of see where you're coming from.
It just, I don't know, that kind of threw me off a bit. But apart from that, and it's a stupid gripe, I think it's wonderful, really good, really unexpected. I forgot how urban it is as well, because it's like, it's for its time, it was set in modern day, which was by no means groundbreaking, but slightly unusual for a horror film not to be kind of like gothic. Do you know what I mean? There's not like crows flying out of the roof of a church all every 5 seconds, and there's not even the atmosphere isn't really generated by shadow or anything like that. And the tension and the suspense, and this kind of harks back to the French Connection a little bit. It's all about what you can see, which is like the opposite of Hitchcock, I always find. Like, I just love that. I love how horrifying the child's face becomes, and just like how confrontational it is to look at it. Like, it's revolting, and like really, and that's where the horror comes from. It's really visceral, and no subsequent child possession horror film has come close to being horrifying. No, it's always like shitty, blurry, like sunken eyes stuff. It's never like Linda Blair with sort of a mouldy face going like, your mother sucked cocks in hell. Like, Jesus Christ. Fuck. And that got nominated for an Oscar.
Well, you got 10 Oscar nominations.
Is that right? Is it 10?
Yeah.
Shit.
Which, for a horror film is a rarity.
I was reading about I think it was either Blatty or Friedkin. You really disappointed it didn't win more, but I was there just thinking, like, horror films never get nominated. No. Seldom. It's been a really long time.
What was the last one? Maybe Get Out was the last one to get nominated,
probably, and that was that might have been screenplay, which actually is the only Oscar The Exorcist won.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was a screenplay.
Okay. I was reading the screenplay today actually, and it's you can tell it's written by the guy that wrote the book.
Oh really? Okay,
it's really good though, really well, as you'd imagine, well written.
Nice. Okay,
I like that idea about the sort of domestic nature of a lot of it. I don't know if it is this, and I might be wrong, but it's... Sorry, I'm not 100% sure when I say this, but I feel like it's sort of like one of the precursors to that sort of domestic horror, the invasion of the home, the domestic space, which became incredibly popular as the 70s went on.
Yeah.
Halloween, especially, you know. But I adore it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And when you look at the film on an analytical level as well, it's so thematically rich.
Oh, mate,
you know, like I've seen it a couple of times now, and you know, every time it's like you find something else to unpack. And you know, I was in the process of doing research. There's just so much stuff that comes to the fore, and a lot of it's about sort of conflicts of faith.
Yes.
Conflict between science and faith as well is another one. It's interesting that there's a creative conflict running through the actual process of making the film between Friedkin as this sort of hardened, cynical filmmaker, with Blatty, who he wrote this after his mother's death. The book. And he was saying, basically in his words, I'm sort of very, very much sort of loosely paraphrasing him, but faith was more hope than a belief.
Oh yeah. Oh,
which is a real strong theme in the movie.
That's tough. That's a tough thing to stomach, isn't it? That's really weighty.
I love that there's that sort of creative battle between cynicism and hope, which I feel like the film carries, particularly in the way. So when Regan starts to, obviously, you know, when she starts to become possessed, like the first half of the film is her like being tested on.
Yes.
And in an effort to sort of find some kind of diagnosis within the realms of, you know, scientific understanding.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about Friedkin's documentary aesthetic in sort of finding the grit in an environment or a way of life that is commonly held within people, you know, with police officers or detectives. In this case, it's used to sort of quite clinical effect.
Yeah.
And it's sort of really close. Like the bits where like they inject her and they pull the thing out and blood squirts out everywhere. You know, there's just those little moments that are like, you know, it sort of speaks this idea that, you know, obviously like medical science is something that is quite rightly lauded as one of the greatest advancements and to the greatest benefit of the human race. But a lot of the procedures are still sort of rooted in like quite archaic methodology, you know, cutting and stabbing, and you know, there's something that really sort of unsettling about that there's and it sort of communicates a vulnerability. And I think it's like a vulnerability that like the sort of more theological elements of the film expose a little bit to make it scarier, because and to heighten that conflict between, you know, modern science or indeed modern society and the myths that are much more dominant in our past, and indeed in theology, and which meant much of which is disregarded even by the priest himself. Even though you could argue that's more of a crisis of faith on his part, but
I like the idea of this whole, what you were saying about home, the invasion of the home, because I was doing, like, again, I was reading about how it came out at the same time Watergate was happening, the scandal about Watergate.
Oh, okay,
and the idea that people are now started to slowly realise that our president can like break into places, and he could like find information anywhere he wants. So yeah, that might be maybe a reason why it was as successful as it was. Not obviously, again, like, it was controversial, particularly because of the theological aspects of it, which a lot of people found difficult to stomach, and there's a whole scene with the crucifix and stuff, and I imagine if you're a diehard Christian, fucking hell, that's tough. That's going to be a really difficult thing to watch. I mean, why would you go and watch it? But then I suppose it's not on the poster, is it? I suppose. It's like, I don't know, I just thought that whole Watergate thing was quite interesting.
There's something interesting there. I like that. It's an interesting comparison I've not considered. But yeah, there's just that right era, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the sort of other central themes in the film, I think, is, again, we sort of mentioned this earlier on in response to to Friedkin and Blatty's sort of like spiritual differences. It is about a crisis of faith, really, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, how can you see good or see God as some sort of benevolent, caring protector when there is so much horror,
Yeah.
When the horror is so much more prevalent and so much more in your face.
Yeah. When it's literally God's adversary.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That is in your house, not him. All of a sudden, you're like, that's really crazy, really interesting.
Heaven is still something you have to have faith for, but hell is there.
Yeah. Hell is on earth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just and it's played so well. I mean, the priest, Damien Karras, who is the vicar who's having the sort of crisis with faith himself, and his crisis isn't even. It doesn't arise as a result of this tale of demonic possession. It arises from the fact that he can't save his mum. His mum's dying, and there's even a scene where like he sees like a homeless guy in the New York Underground.
Oh, okay,
and he asks for money, and he can't help him either, really.
Yeah,
and I think once he starts to hone in on this idea that there is so much horror in the world that he is incapable of dealing with and powerless to deal with, that sort of spills over and sort of almost drowns him. And he can't find solace in a God that he feels isn't really dealing with these problems or saving people that in his mind don't deserve their own personal horror that they're facing.
That's
so
really
it's
cool.
I don't know, like I just find it really interesting that there's so much about that, and I just love that it feels like meta, because of that disagreement, that theological disagreement between Friedkin and Blatty, which is so prevalent, but works because that could have so easily fucking destroyed the film.
Oh, completely.
An ideological difference of that magnitude. You think, fuck. I mean, how the hell did Exorcist end up being that good as a result of that? Do you know?
And then also like widely regarded by Blatty as a masterpiece as well. When it came out, like he loved it, and he was a defender of it during its release, and then directed the third one after he hated the second one so much. It's crazy that how it kind of, once he saw the Friedkin's sort of vision on screen, he was like, oh right, okay, I see what you've that does work, and you have faithfully adapted the source material much more than I thought when we were making it. That's crazy. That's great.
I need to revisit it properly, and I think I will, because
I think I will. Yeah,
it's still very fresh in my mind, because it's one of those films that sort of burnt into your mind once you sort of find your way to it again. But I really want to sit down with someone that hasn't seen it before.
Oh right,
I really want to do that. So I need to just find someone, pick someone up off the street, and just bring them in. And be like, look,
here you are.
Watch this. An undisputed masterpiece.
Oh man!
And upon really getting into thinking, researching and thinking about the film for this episode, it really made me sort of realise how high up in my favourite films this is, which is nice. Wow. It's sort of a strange thing to sort of almost rediscover a film that you've always loved.
Yeah,
strange.
And you find new things in it that you can kind of, you previously maybe overlooked. That's great.
What a film.
Oh.
What a movie.
What a movie.
So I guess we'll move on to Sorcerer.
Sorcerer was his next film,
Yeah.
1977. Which, as you said at the time, didn't do so good. And it got I saw it on your recommendation because the Blu-ray was coming out. The like remastered Blu-ray, and it was like quite highly anticipated. And I was like, this is a blind spot. So I bought it. That's great. And I've not seen The Wages of Fear, which is the film. It's kind of a remake of Wages of Fear, but it's great. Again, an exercise in tension. I think more so, tension is like the central theme of it, really.
Oh, yeah.
Tension and suspense and edge of your seat stuff. It's famously about the kind of central conceit is these guys have to drive a truck through. Is it South America?
Yeah.
And the truck's got like nitroglycerin in it, which it's got almost a bit like Speed, the same kind of concept. If it kind of bumps too hard,
just a reverse version.
The nitroglycerin will explode, and so they have to be really careful driving this truck around South America. And the three men don't get on, do they?
No.
There's a great quote actually by Friedkin, who basically when he was kind of talking about the themes in Sorcerer. He said, so it's about, it's about the world being full of strangers who hated one another, but if they don't cooperate and if they don't work together, they'd blow up. and that's kind of, I love that idea that that they're forced to work together. Not because they have to be nice to each other, because if they don't, this could be the end of their lives.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. I'm assuming you love Sorcerer as well. I think you liked it.
I was the same as you. I remember sort of working my way through Friedkin's work a few years ago, and Sorcerer being really notoriously difficult to find, even on DVD.
Right, which is why the Blu-ray was so anticipated. Okay.
And I think because of I imagine because of like the commercial struggles it had upon release, maybe that impacted the studio's enthusiasm to release a physical copy of it.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like I remember I was seeing on social media fairly recently, because obviously after Friedkin has passed away, there's lots of stuff that's circulating around him on social media.
Right, yeah.
And one of them is that he was like commenting on Amazon, an Amazon account, commenting on DVD versions of the film, saying they were shit, don't bother about it. Don't bother buying
really?
It. Yeah.
Man, okay.
Which again sort of speaks to that sort of bizarre nature to his character.
Oh, I love it.
But yeah, no, I again, same as you, like, I loved it. I actually saw it before Wages of Fear, which I watched afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
Which I'm kind of glad I did do it that way, because I don't know if it really matters, but I actually prefer Wages of Fear.
Okay.
I think it's Henry Clouseau, isn't it? I think that film handles the characterization a lot better.
Right, yeah.
But I think Friedkin's use of, again, that sort of documentary style handheld camera brings an intensity and a claustrophobia that makes that, it sets it apart.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's great. I mean, Roy Scheider again. A mainstay for Friedkin. Weirdly enough, I think he was originally after Steve McQueen.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
But Steve McQueen didn't want to travel to South America, I think because of scheduling reasons.
Right, okay.
He was like, nah.
Yeah.
But he did say it was one of his regrets not having Steve McQueen in it. But
oh, man, okay.
Scheider does an admirable job. I mean, he's one of the great actors of the era. I think he's someone that really flies under the radar in that era, actually. Because of your De Niro's, your Gene Hackmans, etc.
People forget he's the main character in Jaws.
Yeah, I mean,
like, it's
hell.
bizarre.
Yeah,
but he's a fantastic actor, and he's great in French Connection as well. He does all. I think he was slightly typecast, but he plays so well to that kind of tough guy, doesn't he?
He definitely was. I mean, he was in another cop film not long after called The 52 Pickups, which again is like another seedy urban sort of cop drama.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's it's not necessarily like a pale imitation. Obviously, it's his own thing. It's not as good as French Connection, but it's So I can sort of see. Yeah, you're right. I think he's sort of one of those actors that can be sort of pigeonholed.
Yeah.
Quite easily. But just fantastic. Yeah, great film. Incredibly tense. Just so sweaty. It
is. Yeah, it's like
both
Deliverance.
And and the characters in it. But yeah, no, a great movie. But it didn't see the success.
No, it came out a couple of weeks after Star Wars, wasn't it?
Yeah,
a week after Star Wars. So, like, Jesus, that's bad timing. Isn't it?
Terrible timing. I mean, say what you will about the film in comparison to his previous two films. Yeah, it's not as good.
No,
I don't think. Friedkin thinks it's his best, so maybe there's something in that. Maybe worth a rewatch on that basis.
I think it really stands out from a technical perspective. Like the set pieces are just like the bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not as nail biting as the chase in the French Connection, but on its own, it's like that's so well, like, masterfully done in a kind of masterstroke of production design, but a weird mixture of like controlled sort of production design, and then also Friedkin's trademark kind of chaotic camera moves, which a lot of close-ups of wheels in Sorcerer. Wheels going over rocks. You're like, oh god, not now. Like, you're looking at your watch. Has it been an hour and a half yet? Is it going to blow up? Like, I do love Sorcerer, and it is a shame that it isn't as well regarded, although it has definitely got a cult following now.
Yeah, it's definitely had a critical resurgence. I just think at the time when you've got Star Wars out, there's just I think that is a pretty just reason. I don't think you can really level that at Friedkin necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're competing against one of the defining moments in mainstream cinema. Like, you're not gonna win.
No, I mean, it's not a blockbuster, is it, Sorcerer?
No.
Like, and you had Jaws, which was arguably the first blockbuster 2 years before, and then Star Wars, which was this like cultural phenomenon. And yeah, it must have just enveloped everything. It was like it's like Kevin Costner's The Postman, which actually is a shit film, but it came out the same. It's always quite sad listening to stories about films that came out the same week as something like a juggernaut, like just in this Titanic in this case.
Okay,
so The Postman came out the same week as Titanic. No fucking chance. You just got no chance.
Fucking chance.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I love that scene on the rope bridge.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. It's a different kind of tension, isn't it? And it speaks to Friedkin's adaptability as a filmmaker.
Yes,
so you can generate tension in these high octane, quick cutting chase sequences, but you can also generate tension in these moments where it's all about being slow.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
And he also sort of characterizes the vehicles really well.
Oh yeah,
these sort of hulking, aging beasts.
Like Mad Max style trucks.
And they're sort of grinding and croaking, almost as if they can anticipate their demise as much as the people that drive them.
Oh, I didn't think about it like that. Have you seen the concept art for the truck?
No.
It's so good. It's like really amazing illustrations of what they wanted it to look like. It's pretty faithful. They ended up doing a really good job of building this thing.
Yeah, they don't look like conventional trucks necessarily. Well, they do and they don't. It's strange.
Yeah, they're
not
modified.
had any knowledge about trucks.
No, yeah. I think they're modified.
Follow our truck podcast. for that one.
We're going to have to record that after
Trucking
this.
boys to trucking men. No, a great film.
Yeah, really good.
And I'm glad it got that release.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I ever would have seen it had that release not happened.
I'd never heard of it before you said, Sorcerer's getting a Blu-ray release. And I was like, what's Sorcerer? I was like, oh shit, that's Friedkin. Like, it's just,
almost disappeared.
It's an odd one. And I mean, he is playing with genre, isn't he? Because like, you were talking about, and we'll talk about this a bit more later on, like Bug. Although it's a horror film, it looks like body horror, doesn't it? So
yeah, it's sort of like a psychological / body horror thriller.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I mean, there's some similarities to The Exorcist there, but it looks like it's the theological aspect. It looks like they're absent. He's done his cop film, and now he's doing this like a sort of South American set. Almost caper, like
the slowest road movie ever.
Yeah.
Great film. Great film.
Great movie.
I'm going to jump a little bit further on in his career because he did have a few misses, some of which people don't say are as bad as the sort of audiences and critics at the time said they were, but largely it's sort of unanimously agreed that that there was a bar of quality which he established, and many films didn't really meet that quality.
Right, yeah.
You really get the sense now. So Sorcerer was 1977, right?
Yes.
To Live and Die in LA is 1985. So in between that period, he's had some sort of pretty bad films, right?
Yeah, swings and misses, maybe.
Some real misses, and you really get the sense by 1985 and To Live and Die in LA, this is like his big swing to earn back some credibility as a filmmaker.
Okay, and
there's a real urgency about this movie that, because you just get the feeling that Friedkin needs it. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
To sort of, because so many filmmakers, I guess, are really good at it in a certain time period and then struggle to adapt when things change.
Yeah.
But by God, does Friedkin achieve it in To Live and Die in LA? I genuinely think it's, if it wasn't for The Exorcist, it'd probably be my favourite Friedkin movie.
Okay, wow, okay.
So imagine his mastery of the sort of cop, detective, police buddy thing that he perfected in French Connection, and then transporting it to the sort of hedonism and excess of the neon-drenched 1980s.
Okay.
And he just does it. He just absolutely achieves it, And I always find that so incredibly fascinating, that a filmmaker that can do the hard-boiled sort of detective thing, he can do the car chases, he can do the sort of like grimy thematic work that sort of bubbles away underneath.
Yeah.
He can do all that, but he manages to take all that, which to me feels so, that all that stuff feels so, it belongs in the 1970s police drama.
Yeah.
But he just brings that sort of same sort of cynicism and dirtiness into the 80s. And it's just, incredible.
So I've not watched it, unfortunately. I'd like to.
Yeah, I'll lend it to you because it's what I love so much about it is that despite the fact he's clearly like desperate to sort of remind people of his skill and craft as a filmmaker, he still stays with his creative impulses. He cast William Peterson in the lead role.
Okay.
Is it CSI? The guy from CSI?
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so this is like his first major
left field choice.
Yeah.
He wanted to cast someone in French Connection in a similar fashion, and he wasn't able to do it. It was some journalist or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad he finally got to pursue his creative impulses in this one then, yeah.
I mean, even if you think about French Connection, Gene Hackman had only had like a few roles. I mean, obviously his big role before that was a role in Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, I think it's very much in the spirit of that era, though, I guess, that they would sort of bank on these relative unknowns because it's part of that, the ethos of the filmmakers of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in the 1980s, that wasn't something that was really done very much.
No, it was all about the star.
Yeah. And to cast like someone who was literally just doing, I think he was just doing stage production work at the time, to give him a lead role in a film like this. I mean, yeah, it definitely isn't got as much money behind it as his previous films, but still, it's a big gamble.
Okay, yeah.
William Dafoe plays the villain.
Oh, brilliant.
So, he'd been in a few films, but he wasn't like a household name. But what I especially love about it is the visuals and the feel of the movie.
Okay.
It completely embodies the sort of excess of the 1980s. Like that high energy sort of narrative structure that represents that sort of Reaganist period of pure excess. And you've got Robbie Muller's cinematography, who's along probably after Jack Cardiff is my favourite cinematographer. The guy that just, at this point he'd just finished working with Wim Wenders in Paris, Texas.
Oh, okay.
A guy that's mastery of like colour, neon, which is fucking perfect for the 80s, right?
I mean, I was just going to say, this film sounds a bit post Blade Runner almost.
Yeah. It's visually absolutely stunning. Such a good looking movie. I think Robbie Muller is, he also worked with Jim Jarmusch as well.
So, oh, right, okay. Yeah.
And he also did 24-Hour Party People, which I think is quite strange. Yeah.
That was like a sort of early digitally shot film, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, so Michael Winterbottom.
I think that's quite strange that he did that. I didn't know he did that.
That's odd, yeah.
There's that sort of 80s coolness to the detective. I think these sort of 80s detective shows almost fetishized the role of the detective, even though like it's almost more like secret agents, detectives, Friedkin plays them like detectives, he puts them in this sort of detective archetype, and they're dripping in that coolness. But in the case of the lead character, it's immediately apparent that he is not a particularly nice person. He's like a person that would happily alienate or destroy anyone that gets in his way of the thrill of the chase. Again, common theme from Gene Hackman in French Connection, but it played with much more coldness here, much more calculated coldness, whereas Popeye Doyle is like a brute.
Yes.
Here it's more like there's a facade of normalcy that he sort of breaks in these sort of one-to-one exchanges, particularly with his lover, when she says, what happens if I stopped giving you information, sorry, and he just says, I'd throw you in. You know what I mean? So he's hell-bent on doing anything to sort of chase the thrill or the high, and eventually, obviously, win. And in that sense, there isn't really sort of heroism in the traditional sense. He isn't heroic. He's not driven by the need to protect people.
Okay, so selfish. He sounds incredibly selfish. This guy.
He is. He's insane. Yeah, really. And of course, there's another great car chase as well. But this time there's added tension. So basically, what it is, without trying to give too much away, I don't want to spoil it for you because I want you to see it. But they try and rip off a gang in order to get in closer to catching the main villain. And they realise that upon sort of like mucking up this deal, that the people orchestrating the deal are actually also trying to catch criminals. They're like the FBI or something. So they're getting chased, but can't be arrested, because if they're arrested, it blows the case wide open.
Right, yeah.
Or actually, no, it tanks the case entirely.
Oh, wow.
So there's an added layer of tension as well.
Oh, cool.
And there's also a score by Wang Chung.
Oh, right, okay.
80s mainstay, before they released their solid hits, which is brilliant. Again, I think a lot of people with 80s soundtracks would be like, well, they're a bit dated, but again, it's about the 80s, so it's perfect. I don't know why. I don't really see that as a valid criticism, to be honest.
No, it was the start of the electronic era, wasn't
synth,
it? So,
just synth. Ridiculously sort of just constantly throughout the film.
That for me is just that's the 80s. That's a staple of the 80s. That doesn't date films for me at all. I do think it's unusual now to hear that a synth used to that level. And with they're so raw at the time as well. Like they were overused, but I love it. I think it's great.
I mean, it's perfect for the era. I think when we've had this sort of this period of 80s revisionism, haven't we? And I think when it's used in that context, I totally see that as something that's a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
But in the context of a film being made in the 80s, to me, it's like one of the best. I think it's a real hidden gem from the 1980s that a lot of people don't really know a lot about, and it's
well, myself included.
It's a really fantastic film.
Nice.
So worth a go. For the sake of chronology, I'll move on, then we can both talk about the last film.
Okay.
I know you've got quite a lot you want to say about that.
Yeah.
Today I watched another one of his sort of fairly lesser known films. Arguably, for me, certainly one of his lesser known good films.
Yeah.
A film called Bug, by Friedkin, of course, made in 2006 or released in 2006.
Yeah, okay.
And I watched it today, actually, for the first time. Because, as I said, I'd bought it ages ago. It was in the DVD collection and sort of just forgotten that I had it. And, of course, upon talking about this, suddenly I was like, the light bulb moment. I was like, yes, I'm going to watch that. But it's Friedkin bringing his, like, equal parts clinical and sort of grotty documentary style aesthetic to the confines of what is mostly a film that is shot in like one building or one room or two or three rooms, but in the same flat.
Right.
So a lot of it's shot in like a motel.
Right. Okay.
And it follows this woman who is working in a bar and drinks most of her evenings away, and she is being harassed by a former lover who's been sent to prison who is abusive.
Okay.
So this woman has clearly sort of got emotional trauma. She's been besieged by trauma.
Yeah.
And sort of scarcely holding together. Compounding that trauma is losing her child.
Oh God. Okay.
When she goes shopping with her son and he disappears, and she's never been able to find him since.
Oh, that's a tough. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got this sense of this trauma that is like very prevalent, which is sort of, I guess, medicated by alcohol, drug taking, and etc. She happens upon her friend at the bar, introduces her to Michael Shannon's character, who initially presents himself as an odd but sort of quite nice bloke, which is in stark contrast to her ex-partner.
Nice.
Who is back on the scene after coming out of prison.
Right. Yeah.
But as the film progresses, he shows to have his own trauma as a former soldier in Iraq.
Oh, okay.
And it's about this idea, I guess, of like being how like a mind that's been besieged by trauma is obviously open to various sort of neurological issues. Paranoid schizophrenia, for example, is one of the conditions that is
paranoid schizophrenic.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry.
That was on the DVD case. 4 stars. how a person like that is more susceptible to sort of be enveloped in paranoia and to convince yourself of conspiracies.
Oh right, yeah.
And so much so to the point that the characters begin to superimpose those conspiracies and that paranoia onto their immediate environment and onto themselves as well.
Yeah.
It's the way sort of like trauma, I guess, how trauma can impact the way we perceive the world.
Yes.
And our susceptibility to not only sort of really really complex neurological issues, but also conspiracy. And how the machinations of higher powers, it's all about coming after you.
Yeah.
The singular nature of that sort of paranoia. And it gives it sort of like a claustrophobic omnipresence, which sort of, again, batters the characters and, leads them to do some pretty weird and dark stuff.
That's crazy. That I think the use of the child going missing in a shopping mall that's very. I mean, that would. Because is it unresolved? You never find out what happens.
It is
to
unresolved.
The child.
Yeah.
So there you go. Then I mean, like your mind is just going to be filled with scenarios with what's happened. I mean, that harks back to that Jamie Bolger case, that horrible thing that happened in Merseyside in '93. Like, imagine never knowing what happened, though. Like, that's the worst thing, and that would invite conspiratorial ideas into your mind, and I guess into your sort of partner's mind as well. So yeah, I mean, I've not seen it, but that sort of cements it in my mind as something definitely, again, along with To Live and Die in LA, to be watched.
Yeah, it's really simply done as well. Like, there's no frills to it. Like, it just shows the value of like tried and tested techniques if done properly, and given a sprinkling of Friedkin's, deft handling of darkness. He can really handle dark themes really quite well at his best.
Yeah,
and then it sort of becomes this psychological / body horror, because Michael Shannon's character starts to reveal that he has this.
So like auditory and visual hallucinations of
basically he thinks there's like bugs everywhere, and that these bugs are like part of some sort of like global conspiracy by the United States to sort of maintain the status quo and all this sort of stuff. Man. Strangely relatable in the modern age, certainly in the post-COVID age, where a lot of people,
the unseen
threat,
right?
A lot of people were saying that they're going to inject you with microchips and stuff.
Yeah.
Which seemed obviously ridiculous from our perspective, but when you sort of see this film that treats the mindset with real sincerity. Oh, good, okay. And it sort of makes you realise in their mind how legitimate it is.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I'm not saying that in the perspective of people that are in terms of the COVID thing, but it did make sort of humanise that a little bit for me in a way. Whereas before I would have sort of just gone, whatever, what a load of bollocks. It sort of humanises that, and you think, what is the, what's under
what's
that?
The catalyst for this?
Yeah.
I'm guessing in this case it's post-traumatic stress.
And then that obviously leads to the presentation of other sort of issues that he has.
Wow. Okay.
But it's also this idea that these characters sort of find each other at first, and there's obviously something inherently sad about that. That their desperation for connection sort of brings them together, and ultimately is to their detriment. But there's something bizarrely sweet amongst the horror of it, which is really strange and classic Friedkin. I think he knows how to sort of to make those moments feel odd, to sort of have a contrasting emotion to what you should be feeling, which is definitely still there as well.
No, there's definitely a subdued warmness, maybe less so in The Exorcist, but definitely like French Connection with the relationship between the two cops. They do sort of love each other, and it is there, and it's not at the centre of anything, but like he is good at that. He is good at kind of undercutting you with like character moments. I just realised another reason why I haven't watched Bug. It came out the year before a film with Jessica Alba in it called The Eye, which looked shit, and the poster's really similar. It's like a kind of white background with the main title of the film embedded in a body part. And it's the same kind of style, and so I must have written it off.
It gets lumped in, I can see that, and that's speaks to how effective or ineffective a advertising campaign can be.
It's odd because I love the poster now. I looked at it just then and I was like, that's really good. Like,
really cool. A real great film, and it was sort of, again, just a reminder of simple techniques, and the subtext work behind those simple techniques is done so well that there's no need for the frills, and it's a much more cinematically sedate film for Friedkin. And again, it just shows that adaptability. He's worked across so many eras of film history. And okay, the guy's had a few duds, but when he hits it, it shows that ability to sort of transition. I mean, because you think about the mid 2000s, it was all about that sort of like, again, a sort of handheld digital camera style.
Yes.
I don't know if it was shot digitally. I'm not that sort of technically knowledgeable, so I don't know. Just by looking at the film, I'd be interested to know what you think about that afterwards. But, it feels like one of those like real sort of cheap and personal films that I guess that kind of technology allowed in that period of time.
different lighting setups and stuff. It's more simple lighting setups or no lighting setups. Because digital, the sensors let more light in. And it was easier to clean up, and it was much easier to just like point and shoot, basically. And like that must have been. I wouldn't be surprised if it was shot digitally.
I don't know. I'd love to know. I'd be let me know as soon as you see it.
I will do.
But, even if not, it feels evocative of that. Of that period of like, cameras that are used for like home movies are being used for movies, or
28 Days Later with the mini DV. And also there was a film with Peter Mullen in it that was digitally shot that came out around the same time as Bug. I can't remember what it's called. Set in like an insane asylum, but that has a similar feel to it anyway. Fuck, I can't remember what that film's called. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So
let me jump forward to 2011.
That's right. Yeah, Killer Joe. Great film. Again, another really good one. I mean, it's cleaner. I think he's probably employed a different cinematographer at this point and was more focused on sort of depicting that kind of small town America, trailer park sort of style. And I actually don't remember a tremendous amount about it, but I remember it being, again, like really confrontational, especially at the end with the chicken drumstick and stuff, and the way that's kind of like hypersexualized at the end. And it's just really odd, really like one of the most bizarre things I've seen in a Friedkin film. Again, it's horrifying because of what you're shown. There's nothing like lurking in the background of any of his films. It's just like, that's a gruesome moment. Start the Reconnaissance as well. Arguably the film that elevated Matthew McConaughey out of his sort of pretty boy rom-com character, that sort of stuff, and back into the sort of the art house section of cinema.
Absolutely.
Really interesting casting choice. Again, we were talking earlier about Friedkin's choice of actor. I mean, that's a really unusual one, but he must have seen something in McConaughey there, which he kind of admired and cast him. And Emil Hirsch as well. I mean, he's really good in it.
Juno Temple.
That's right. I just, from what I remember it being really, really atmospheric and really like kind of in the same vein as like Place Beyond the Pines, right? And that kind of small town Americana style. And I think for him to transition into that sort of section of filmmaking, he does a really good job, and it's earned its place amongst sort of those sort of films like Mud as well, and that's another McConaughey small town America stuff. Type film.
I remember Mud.
Although he's a much more sympathetic character in Mud. This guy turned out to be a bit of a prick in the end. But, nasty. I mean, I wish I'd seen it more recently actually, but I do hold that in quite high regard as well.
Absolutely, it's a film there's a sort of ever-present intensity, and he almost, I don't know, it sort of feels like he's like mythologizing this sort of that American trailer park existence. Do you know what I mean? Like that documentary film style aesthetic could have so easily sort of made it feel like more like a documentary in the pursuit of realism.
Yes,
but there's something a little bit more. I don't know, it feels like, even though handheld is evidently used in the film, it feels the impact is not quite as rough as in other films. It feels like there's more control.
Yes, I think so.
And I think that speaks to, again, that what you're saying about that, the intensity of the film and the unease. I think that is created by that sort of perhaps more controlled use of the camera in the more sort of more unsettling or tense sequences. A lot of static camera.
A lot of that.
Particularly in the sort of interactions between the characters.
It's funny how, I mean, it comes full circle, because I feel like Killer Joe was quite heavily inspired by Seven in the way it was shot. It's more methodical, right, and more only handheld when it wants to be. And again, I was looking up the inspiration, French Connection inspirations. Fincher decided to use handheld in Seven in the chase sequence because of the French Connection. Okay. So it comes full circle.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There we go. I thought that was great because Fincher famously fucking hates handheld. He doesn't like. There's like one shot in The Social Network that's handheld, and he really didn't want to use it, and he had to. I thought that was great. But for Seven, there's a really intense chase sequence in like I think it's a hotel or like an apartment building when he's chasing John Doe, and it goes mental all of a sudden. It changes style completely to like the chase in the French Connection of just like it's everywhere. It's just a big blurry mess. I just thought that was an interesting kind of full circle.
No, it is. It's a really unsettling movie, and it sort of plays on a lot of the tropes of the Deep South as well, but not in a way that feels particularly offensive.
I
mean, I might need to rewatch it before I commit to that 100%. But
no, I think
was
you're
that
right.
Ron Howard Deep South film?
Oh God, yeah, the hillbilly.
Yeah,
thing.
Completely sort of bizarre.
Is it called the
and
hillbilly?
Ultimately exploitative film. Wasn't very good.
I mean, that sort of Deep South thing can be used for real negative effects sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean,
perhaps being the most sort of most archetypal example of a negative representation.
A
really great film and a horrifying ending.
Really,
probably the most horrifying ending in any of Friedkin's films.
Christ, yeah.
Or in any film, really, that I could think of in recent memory. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, it catches you off guard. It almost gets sort of Gaspar Noé levels.
Oh God, yeah, that's the perfect
grotesque.
yeah. I've got some comments here.
Oh, cool, nice.
Not as many.
No. That's nothing to do with the fact that we posted it earlier today.
yeah. So I put a poll out. So first off, I'll address the poll. So I put favourite Friedkin film. And you can only put 4 in, but I thought I'd put the 4 main ones, the 4 most well-known ones.
Nice.
The Exorcist, French Connection, Sorcerer, and To Live and Die in LA.
Cool.
Exorcist, clear winner. So The Exorcist, 57% of our beloved listener base thought it was the best Friedkin film.
57?
Yep.
Oh, wow, okay.
French Connection and Sorcerer have 14% apiece, and To Live and Die in LA at 15%.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
And I sort of anticipated that. As I think the impact of The Exorcist is more. I think it's it's more knowable, and more you can see it more.
Yeah, it's entered into horror films have a great way of entering the public's consciousness, despite the fact they never win Academy Awards. They always do have a hook, right? So when you think of John Landis, you don't think of like National Lampoon's Animal House, do you? You think of An American Werewolf in London, and I think that might be the same thing. It's just like it's probably almost certainly one of his most widely seen films.
Yeah.
And arguably one of his best as well. I don't know.
I think it probably is his best film for me. I mean, I think To Live and Die in LA and French Connection are so close for me. I don't know what I'd pick. Right now, probably To Live and Die in LA.
Okay, well there you go.
That might change. They asked some questions if anyone had any other films they wanted to mention or indeed wanted to just expand.
Okay.
And Lee put all listed in the selection are phenomenal, but especially To Live and Die in LA. So.
Okay. From what you described, that seems very much up Lee's street.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
He also said, Killer Joe deserves a shout-out, a modest yet slick and sweaty southern thriller which arguably began the reconnaissance.
Ah,
so
cool.
There you go.
There we go. Nice.
You pointed that earlier.
Oh, perfect.
And I also, any general things about Friedkin himself, and Alfie said, shitty person, one of the greats of New Hollywood.
Oh, right, okay.
So I guess that's speaking, I don't think we've touched on it a little bit, but obviously his confrontational directorial style, slapping actresses.
Linda Blair, child actress as well. Tricky. I mean,
having some pretty ropey conversations with her as well in the process of casting as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I couldn't argue with that on that basis.
He was definitely a very abrasive character. And that's like, you can see that, and like you can hear the stories about the way he directed Linda Blair and The Exorcist, like putting her on wires, just throwing her about the room and stuff. I'm like, and I think Ellen Burstyn had a similarly negative experience with him making The Exorcist. You could argue that it's all in the pursuit of a good performance, sort of James Cameron levels of being horrible to people.
Yeah.
But I do. Yeah, I think you can be decent to people and still be kind of gifted.
Yeah.
I think like it is troubling and it's difficult. Even back then, it's not nice.
No, and it's easy to romanticize it on the basis of how good those elements of the film are as well. Like Ellen Burstyn's performance is fantastic, so it's just like maybe that did contribute to that, but that's not the way to go about it.
No, I mean, like another example is the classic example maybe would be like Shelley Duvall from The Shining.
Right. Yeah.
It is, and that I would argue is definitively made her performance better because she's so you feel so dreadful for her, but she's so hysterical in that film, and you can tell she's so tired, and
fucking
her
exhausted,
eyes are just like bloodshot red that whole time, but it works for the film. So God, it couldn't be done any other way. So I mean, maybe that's just me kind of getting on the Kubrick wagon a little bit too much, but
I think it's what we were saying earlier about it's easy to romanticize it on the basis of the quality of the work. But if the suffering was that bad, then obviously it's not worth it necessarily.
No, and
we have the benefit of watching the film, years later on.
Yeah, exactly.
And that might water down the sort of, the negative feelings around that for many people. I don't know, but when you think about it, obviously not good.
No. Also, I think she struggled to find work after The Exorcist, Linda Blair, as did Shelley Duvall after The Shining. It's like something to be said there about maybe if you push these actors that hard and kind of almost torture them to that extent, they're going to lose their faith in their own jobs. I think that might have happened in both cases here. Which isn't good. And,
I mean, as well, talking from personal experience of my limited time spent on TV sets. Like, there is no romanticism on a TV set. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can romanticize it as a viewer.
Yes.
But I'd never had too many bad experiences personally, but I have worked on a TV film where the director was very difficult,
right,
and it made a lot of people's jobs very difficult and stressed them out a lot. And it's easy to, like I said, easy to romanticize from a distance, but when you see it firsthand,
right,
you sort of think, oh, what a bell end. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder what people would have thought of.
You're not thinking, what a genius. Are
yeah. Strange.
Oh man,
strange stuff. Outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it.
Then.
I really enjoyed that. Good to dive deep, and we perhaps wouldn't have done that had he not passed away. So.
No, I mean, that was really great. Actually, really good to sort of deep dive, kind of dig your fingers into the pie that is Friedkin. That was poorly phrased. Maybe I should I leave that in?
Yeah, I'm
gonna leave that in. Yeah. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's meant well.
Yeah.
So, as mentioned right in the intro, I realised when we were doing the Barbie episode, I said outro instead of intro. Got my wires crossed.
Well, don't worry, because my mum's listened to it and she didn't mention it.
Good.
So, good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mum. As mentioned in the intro of this episode, we were going to pick 4 directors each and then leave it to the adoring listener to provide their own director choices. And what we'll do, we'll do like a roulette thing, and then we'll go away, watch the films, do a bit of research, then do an episode about them.
Brilliant.
Myself and Ben have chosen 4 directors each, which we'll throw into the roulette wheel of cinema. Ben, give us your 4.
Cool. So we've got James Mangold.
That's an interesting choice. I like that.
Yeah, I think a bit odd because he is, by his very nature, he's sort of a genre director, but he's done some great movies like 3:10 to Yuma and obviously Logan, and he did a film I quite like called Identity as well. So I'd like to talk about him. I don't think there's enough podcasts about Mangold. Paul Thomas Anderson, who,
of course.
I mean, he's got to be thrown in there.
Yeah.
Andrea Arnold,
good choice.
Yeah, I like her a lot, especially Fish Tank. That's like up there as like one of my favourites.
Yeah, I watched one of her short films recently. It was brilliant. It's on Mubi.
Oh.
Wasp.
Is it on Mubi?
Yeah,
Lovely.
it is. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, perfect.
It's won the Oscar for best short film, didn't it?
Yeah,
and it had
that's
Danny
right.
Dyer in it, so Danny Dyer is sort of Oscar worthy.
Danny Dyer has
strange.
been in an Oscar
Yeah.
nominated movie. There we go. And finally, Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah,
who
solid.
I mean, yeah, he's great. I think he's brilliant. Like even his lesser known movies, like quite like The Little Princess. Actually,
Okay, I've not seen that. So.
It's good. Yeah, just like I mean, one of my 4 personal favourite directors, Sans Boyle, who I think will be a bit of an obvious choice for me, and I've talked about him to death already. So yeah, still want to do the Sun.
I admire your restraint. The 4 I picked were Kiyoshi Kurosawa,
Nice.
Celine Sciamma.
Yeah.
I did Google the pronunciation. Of that one.
Yeah.
Mike Lee and David Cronenberg.
Oh, Cronenberg. Okay.
So yeah,
Lovely.
I felt like I think we've done quite well. That we've picked a nice, interesting, broad range of filmmakers, and we'll be looking forward to see what you guys pick as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll put that poll out relatively soon because even if we don't do another director deep dive for a while, it'd be good to have it.
Yeah.
In the works, so we could go away and watch the films.
Yeah, perfect.
Do the research.
Lovely.
Next week, the typical Cineboys organisational skills. I believe next week we're going to have a guest.
Lovely. Okay.
Lovely Jordana, a friend of mine, who I've been wanting to get on for quite a while. She wants to do a discussion around anime cinema.
Brilliant.
Around anime films. Sorry.
Yeah, real blind spot for me. So I'll be watching as many of them as I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be very much learning as opposed to commenting. I think with next week,
brilliant.
which is good. I'm looking forward to it.
It was an area I was exposed to in my teen years because I had a friend who was really into it. And I was sort of lukewarm to some of it, but I think that obviously it's like anything. There's really good examples in that medium, in that genre, and hopefully we get to talk about those because they're excellent, and I'm looking forward to what you think about them. Actually,
cool.
In the interim,
yeah.
In the meantime, have a lovely week, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.